Hello. So I'm Ben Kus. I'm Box CTO. And then today we wanted to talk about the evolution of AI. So quick question. So who here has played with ChatGPT? Good. Who here has been working on putting it inside their product or using ChatGPT or an OpenAI APIs inside of their product? Who here is interested in using ChatGPT or something similar in their product? All right. Has anybody launched any products yet with ChatGPT? Okay. Anybody here an AI researcher? Okay. Yes. Okay. So
you're going to have to leave if you.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed when we talk to companies is that it's a little bit confusing, some of the sort of the new world of AI versus what you might even call the old world of AI. So one of the things we wanted to do was sort of start out by talking about the sort of, very arguably, we're in a new era of AI. Like, it's kind of like right now is like maybe the time when the iPhone 3 came out, right? It's this idea of, this is different. This is something new. And so, but the word AI is not new, and of course there's a lot of things that probably all of your companies already have done in AI. So the way that I look at this is there's a bit of a trend going over time. So who here has ever built a neural network? Okay. So like I think since probably the 1970s, neural network technology has been around. We used to do it in school. Like it's just it's a cool thing. You get to, it's pretty good. One of the first things you do is you recognize handwriting with your little neural network that you build. Image recognition, classification problems. AI is great for it, and it's really cool because oftentimes it's better than machine learning techniques that do something similar. It's really interesting to think that this is like modeling the way the brain works, and so this is it's neat. And then came the idea of it's not just about neural networks, but it's about deep neural networks. And I'm going to include in here recurrent neural networks, convolutional neural networks. It's the cool AI of the last many years. And a couple of things were different, which were that more layers, but they're way bigger. And so the compute that goes into these are like just tremendously, a lot more resources go into training these and to setting these whole things up. So you have these millions of parameters, and then you can do really cool things. And to me, this is the awesome thing about the last 5 years is facial recognition, Siri, self-driving cars, weather prediction, AlphaGo. Like these are the world where if you get AI researcher, or if you get AI engineers, if you get data scientists, and you have data and you apply it to a problem, you can do some really amazing things using the power of these really cool neural networks. And so these are very cool, but these are what you might call narrow AI. From the perspective of when you train it to do one thing. You get a bunch of data, you set up a model, and you get an output. And you have to, different techniques, of course, but you like train it to really provide you what is the one thing it does. The model that's so awesome about translating to different languages has nothing to do with predicting weather or driving your car, or even in some cases like sentiment, other textual or other image recognition and so on. So this narrow AI has really dominated almost the whole history of AI up until a few months ago. Because now enter the foundational model, the large language model, the transformer technologies. Technically speaking, these are neural networks, but they are different in terms of a couple things. Number one, it's a transformer. The T in GPT is a very interesting new technology, new research for the last few years. In addition to how big these things are. This is only possible because of GPUs and because of the sort of the kind of the public cloud and then sort of all of these, the evolution of the compute that's available to train on. I think a few years ago, few people would have ever said, oh yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to train hundreds of billions of parameter neural network. And I actually don't know how many neurons are in the brain, but I think it's in this ballpark of hundreds of billions. Does anybody know the answer, by the way? Okay. So when you did this, suddenly something very crazy happened, which is that these networks, these transformer-based neural networks, these large language models, they became able to understand language. They became able to do things that really I don't think anybody thought was really possible a little while ago, measured in months or in years, except for in the research communities. I don't think it's right to call this general AI. That has a very specific term. But this is the crazy thing about these is how the one model which is not trained on whatever you want it to do, can do very many things. That is, again, from a product perspective, from an engineering perspective, from a like what's possible in the world perspective, this is all new and crazy. And this, I think, is kind of mind-blowing. Since you're all here and because everybody's been talking about it for nonstop for a while, like I think we all agree. So I think many of you already kind of have some of the background here, but I'll just kind of go into it. So it's crazy to me to think about how this works, which is it's just a really sophisticated autocomplete. It doesn't really know about what it's talking about. It doesn't look anything up. It just completes the sentence. So something simple. Why does the chicken cross the road? Of course. So this is the playground output to get to the other side. That's the DaVinci 3. The DaVinci 4 or GPT-4 will give you a more sophisticated view of it, but that's an obvious autocomplete. So it figured out that that sentence should that should be completed that way. I don't know if you can read this. So I told it, here's a joke. What's the longest word in the dictionary? Guess the answer. It didn't. It said, I don't know. What's the answer to the joke? Again, this is autocompleted. It just thinks this is the right thing to say. Smiles. That was the joke. And then it says, aha, I see. Smiles is the longest word in the dictionary because it has a mile between each S. That's a clever play on words. Thank you for sharing the joke. Again, it thinks that that's the right thing to say based on all of its training, not understanding the joke. And that's crazy. This is longer. Explain quantum mechanics to a 5-year-old. Did a pretty good job, I think. But again, the funny thing about this is this same thing, just the simple algorithm, the transformer technology about figuring out what's the words to say after a certain text can do all of these things. And that's where the mind-blowing aspect comes in. OK, so how does this work? Apologies for anybody who already knows this, but I think it's very interesting to look at. So you start with the model, GPT-3, GPT-4, any of the transformer technologies, very big, lots of parameters. And then you train it on everything that you can find. Wikipedia, all books in the world, all publicly available websites, any other data set you have access to. You train it on probably petabytes of content, of text, or of anything that you can find. And then to do this, you really need an awful lot of compute. The estimates I see, $50 million these days to train a new large language model and get it working right. So this is not something you do on your laptop. This is something that you train with a tremendous amount of input of resources. Then, and this is where, to me, this is where the research became a fundamental new era, in OpenAI deserves all the credit, ChatGPT, is you actually fine-tune it. These large language models have been around for a long time, and you fine-tune it with people who tell you what's good or bad. If you don't do this, remember, it's trained on the internet. It's trained on all of the comments on every piece. It's trained on weird books. You're going to get really weird answers. And if you remember a few years ago, people would come out with large language models, and they were not pleasant. They were very inappropriate. And because that's what they learned. I know how to autocomplete this sentence. I always like I think it's Coughlin's law of all chat. Okay, all chat discussions on the internet will eventually end with somebody else calling somebody a Nazi. And sure enough, these things would have that behavior. So what they do is they get a bunch of people, and then the model will output, given a prompt, output something, and then you have people rank it. This one's bad, this one's good, and then they feed it back in, and there's a loop in there. And again, I think this is just tremendous, is that approach became just capable to do almost most things that people can do. So describe what venture capitalism as a haiku. Nobody trained it to figure out haikus. It just read a lot of haikus. It knows math, and it's not like it has a calculator. It just figured it out because it read times tables and because it saw math going on. And it gets it wrong sometimes, which is really funny. And so this is the crazy world of large language models. And again, I think maybe nowadays, everybody's kind of moved on from this, but it's surprising, I think even the people who built it, how well this works for so many things. This came out a couple days ago. This is all of the AP Calculus test, AP English Literature, the bar exam, AP Biology, and the green is GPT-4, the blue is GPT-3.5, ChatGPT, and then this is how good it does against a percentage of people. So for a while, it was doing pretty well. It was pretty good at AP Environmental Science, but then the new one's just doing really well. So this thing is basically as smart as a college grad. it's not an expert in everything, which is an important piece, but it is very good at a lot of things. And you see these like benchmarks for these different tests that they have. How soon does it meet the red line, which is human behavior? And it used to take a long time for these models to go up, but then as they got bigger and bigger, and as time goes on, like now they're beating humans in like right after releases. And so many different benchmarks are just kind of being blown away. And this is the crazy world. Okay, so fun technology, cool stuff. So what? So for me, if you're a product person, if you're in a company, if you're thinking about a new company, if you're thinking about what to do, it's like, what do you do with this? What is it good at? How can I think about this? And this is how I think it's a very interesting thing to think about. Imagine that you have armies of aliens came to visit the Earth. This is one of my favorite Stanford professors has this as his this quote. And these aliens are just super smart. And you kind of need to figure out how to talk to them, but they're there. And they work all the time. They're available for you. You can just basically text them, and they'll tell you anything that they want. So you have an army of human-like, intelligently capable aliens all the time. What would you do with it, and how would it affect your business? This is an interesting way to think about it because you start to think like, what would I do with this army? Like, I could do so many things. I could change almost everything about how I interact with my users. I could change about how they interact with their content, or I could have them write things for me. They could be personal assistants. I can talk to them because I'm bored. Like, all of these become very available when you start to think about it in that way. And this is, I think, a pretty accurate way to describe the potential of this kind of technology. So most people here are associated with probably a small to mid-sized company. And of course, what you do with this army of aliens, or what you do with this new technology, is think about how to change something that's in the world today. And this is the craziness right now, right? Is that every big company, every new startup, every mid-sized company, I'm at Box, we spend all our time on this, is thinking about what you could do with this technology. And this is crazy. Like, arguably, the biggest shift and the fastest shift in the last, 10 years, maybe on par with mobile, maybe on par with cloud, maybe beats those. This is the sort of the moment that a lot of people are looking at and trying to sprint towards. Like, these companies don't usually announce this quickly. It's very rare to have like Salesforce say like, I've just announced a new product that'll be available in many, many months from now, or like I haven't really defined it, but it's available. Like announcing you can sign up for an alpha in 3 months. Like they're all racing to say that they're using this technology in these new ways. And of course, everybody who's in a small company is thinking how they're going to be so slow because they're not going to get this right, and then you're going to disrupt them. Okay, what's the catch? These aliens are not cheap. Depending on which model you use, it is you start to think about it like legitimately as like human costs of labor. Really cheap humans, but like the GPT-4, if you're chatting with it, it'll cost you a couple dollars an hour, which is very, very different from the normal way that you think of infrastructure costs. Like usually you measured in fractions of cents per interactions, and this is depending on which the GPT 3.5 that came out Turbo is amazingly cheap. That's awesome. They 10x reduced it, but then they 30x increased it for GPT-4 the cost, and that's. This is also the crazy idea for everybody who wants to figure out, should I use the awesomeness of GPT-4 and all of the wonderful things it can do, and it's amazing, or should I pay 30 times less and then use the pretty good GPT 3.5 or some other equivalent large language model that's both coming out today, yesterday, and in the future, which will be pretty good but not as good. And the reason they're expensive is because it's just a huge amount of compute that goes into these things. Like, as you're typing to it, and as it's, you see it type slowly, it's not because it's like, oh, I'm going to pretend to type. It's because it's thinking about each word, and there's a lot, many GPUs in it, like at full speed, like thinking about everything that you're doing to it. And I think they're running out of GPUs in the world now. There's like a race to see who can get the latest silicon. Okay. Expensive is one problem. Hallucination, depending on what you're doing, and many of you already know this, is it's really funny. It can authoritatively tell you something that's completely right and so insightful, and a moment later tell you something that is just completely wrong. Like, it's funny to see all the different models when they hallucinate. And they hallucinate when they at weird times, and they don't seem to know they're hallucinating. I guess in a weird way, it's like a human, right? Like sometimes they, like these are bullshitters, like big time. Like and then but it's hard to figure it out. And of course, that is a huge problem. I think this is why search is an extra hard problem, generic search, because you kind of really want to know that what you're looking at is accurate, and these things often don't know. And of course, there's many techniques to deal with that. Backlash. Like for me personally, when I talk to my customers, when I talk to people in the company, when we look at these things, every single person I talk to, when I get the lawyer to review, see if it's good at looking at contracts, when we talk about the press release that it just generated, when we talk about all this stuff, everybody's like, that's my job. Like, and so of course there's always, well, we're gonna make your job better, right? Like, but there is this moment that everybody's facing of like, wait a minute, like, at Box, we like it appears that this thing is a pretty good executive. It'll go and like replace the communications of our CEO. It's kind of a joke. We'll have it'll ask it to have a conversation between the CEO, the CTO, the head of legal or whatever. It's pretty good. It like seems like it's the things that we're talking about. And then of course, this is for people who've done AI in the past. Have you heard of AI winters? And then how many have there been? Like 5. And so usually the hype of these things gets so big, like still kind of have self-driving cars, not really. Like, and so I think this one's different personally, and I've lived through a couple of them. But it's very important to remember that like some people are taking this to the extreme. Like I don't know if these things are, like some people are like, oh, they're so smart, they're gonna come up with these new ideas about things that humans have never thought of. I don't think so. It like learned on the internet. It doesn't have like new and novel insights unless it gleaned them from content. And so it is interesting to think about where we are in this hype cycle. And for me, my advice that I always give is ignore here and here, head for the thing that it's really good at. Because a lot of people will get caught up in these waves, and there's only going to be and this wave actually seems to be way faster. Like it was so funny to see companies who announced an AI thing, their stock goes up. The next company that announced it wasn't cool enough, their stock goes down. The next company announced, and everybody's like, well, we've seen that before. And so, in terms of heading towards the plateau of productivity on the hype cycle, like it is interesting to see like where that will end up. How high is it? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who will tell us about trends in the marketplace.
Thank you, Ben. That was awesome. Applause for Ben. Are you excited about aliens trained on the internet that work 24/7? That sounds crazy. I'm the chat part of the Chat GPT. He's the brains. I'm like the UI piece of this. So I'm gonna try to talk a little bit about how this will apply towards products that we're building in the consumer and marketplace space. And one way to start that is just to ground us in what's been happening in marketplaces. And there's been a few trends that have been happening for probably a decade. One being personalization. Everything we're seeing, we're finding products faster that are relevant to us, way quicker than we have in the past. Mobile commerce, that's been a trend for a very long time. Social commerce, whatnot, Facebook, Pinterest, et cetera, are all looking to find ways to bring commerce into their platforms. And then omni-channel. How many people have bought something on Amazon and returned it at Whole Foods? Like this process is really fascinating and fun. Sustainable and ethical practices working their way throughout all of this. So that's the backdrop. And then if we think about AI has existed for decades as well. I worked at Netflix in the early 2000s. We used lots of AI in our personalization. When you're looking at Netflix and finding something to watch, the rows and how the movies or TV shows are sorted, that's all AI. This is narrow AI, as Ben was talking about, but it's been there. Real-time matching, if you've ever used Uber, if you're finding a driver and finding a dynamic price for that, is all AI. Search ranking, customer service, fraud detection, AI has been used in all of this for a very long time. So this trend, these winters that we've seen have produced really awesome features and products that we use every day, and I think it's going to continue pretty rapidly. Here's an example of what Uber is doing, and there's lots of AI just in both of these things. The finding, matching of a car, and then the pricing around all of that is right there in front of us every day. We don't even notice it. It's like invisible. It's like oxygen. It's there. And I think that's going to continue for us. And there's a whole bunch of new capabilities that AI is going to enable for us. I'll take the first one, automatic tagging. So if I go back to my days at Netflix, if anyone's seen rows of movies called something like gritty crime TV shows from the 1980s featuring a strong female lead, these types of things, these were editorial staff. We had large editorial staff that was coming up with these really clever ways to assort movies and TV shows. It's not clear to me that that is needed from a human anymore. AI can just do that, and for me that doesn't just remove the human at all. It takes the human and makes them the editorial piece of this. There's got to be an editorial piece to this, but I think AI can do that. And if we go on the bottom rows on this, there was an announcement by the OpenAI team where they fed a diagram, like a napkin diagram of how a website could look, and fed that into GPT-4, and it produced the code that would be used to produce the diagram of what that website would look like. That's pretty cool. But it also makes me think, like, what is the future of a low-code, no-code platform going to look like, and how might that evolve, that type of thing? But it also doesn't remove all of us from the equation. In some ways, it empowers us. How many more people are able to create an experience that was only reserved to the few because they can take a crude drawing on a napkin, feed that into GPT-4, and produce code that then they can just run and produce a website from? That's pretty amazing. And that's generally what I think has been happening with AI over the decades. Is we've moved from in the past where we're completely doing the manual work to the present where I think we're doing less and less of the remedial work. It's not, and I use remedial very specifically. It's not that the work is gone. It's the remedial, the basic work, I think, is being moved out. And I think in the future, hopefully, there's just no remedial work. And again, we're in that place where we can be editors to some of this, and it empowers much more than we've been able to do in the past. If you think about teams, if you're building this out, there's a number of functions that I think are required to build out an awesome AI product or AI features in your product, from data scientists to data engineers to AI developers to product managers to business analysts to UX designers. All that's still needed. To some extent, you could say AI engineers are some of the hardest engineers to find. Ben can probably back me up on this. Some of the hardest engineers to find and most expensive engineers to find. Now, with GPT-4, maybe it makes what they would produce much more accessible to all of us non-aliens, because we can just go and put some prompts in there and produce results that would have otherwise required a team of 10 AI engineers. So I think there's some real novel, interesting pieces to this that are going to unfold over time that are going to be really useful to us. But basically, this is the type of team that is needed in order to pull this off. And when I talk to product teams, so I do a bunch of advising of early stage founders on their building their product. And when I think about how do we layer in AI and how do we think about these large language models and what GPT 3.5 and 4 and 3 and all these aliens can do for us, there's a few guiding questions that I tend to go for on this. One is, how can we not just improve this incrementally? That's important, but I assume it's going to happen. How do these models change the experience and 10x it in some way? So you could imagine if you're, I worked at Opendoor, if you're creating a mortgage experience, and I have to go through an online form to get my mortgage. Could the whole UI be chat-based, and could it be all powered by something like GPT 3.5 or 4? Absolutely, and I think that experience, being able to have my questions answered, upload documents, have them be able to pull stuff out of it, tell me what I'm missing, with no human, instantaneous, that would be a magical experience. So I think there's like some 10xing there. There's also an incremental cost. Ben illuminated that very well. And then there's an existential risk. This I hear a lot from companies I'm working with, even small ones. 20-person company, I was just talking to them. They're like, if we don't accelerate our work on AI, someone else is going to do that, and this could make our product obsolete. So it's not just the big companies like Box or Salesforce that are thinking, it's like small companies are also worried some other small company is going to produce some AI breakthrough and lap them. And that's really hard, because how do you guide that? Do you say, yeah, you know what, scrap everything you're doing and go only after building the future AI version? Or do you build at it incrementally? You have to hire some AI engineers It's really hard to do. So these are really tricky, tough problems, but I would say the answer most go for is like they have to start, and there is a start somewhere, and so that's what I would recommend there. And then last is, what remedial tasks can generative AI eliminate for your team or your customers? I gave the mortgage example of how that could happen, but there's a whole bunch of things I think on the internal team side that people are doing that could just be eliminated completely.